welcome or welcome back to the No Small Talk podcast. I'm your host, Simone, and today we're doing a very special edition of No Small Talk. It is a season 1 recap. If you've never seen or listened to No Small Talk, and you are kind of like, well, what is it about? This is a really great episode for you to tune into. We're going to recap basically like a deep dive of every episode we've gone through for this season. I've had various different guests. Devin is my first male guest, and we're just really excited to kind of go over everything. Like I said, if you've never tuned in before to No Small Talk, there will be spoilers, but not so many that I think it will ruin any of the episodes for you. I would still encourage you to listen. If there's anything that piques your interest, to go back and listen to those episodes in season 1. Or you can be like Devin and listen to every episode in chronological order.
Yeah, so think about a recap is, most of us watch TV shows, and, if we start in the next season, it typically, recaps the second, and usually, just small snippets kind of mesh together into an efficient amount of time. So that was kind of the idea and the motivation behind this episode. And so hopefully it would serve as a reminder of what occurred, what was talked about, what was hit on, and increase the excitement for the following season, which is usually what recaps do.
Yeah, well, that is the goal.
Yeah.
And the other goal, which is the mission of the No Small Talk podcast overall, is to explore ideas surrounding personal growth, politics, overall well-being, and I would say society through the lens of the Christian walk. So all of our perspectives are meaningful, but ultimately our goal is to arrive at what is truth. And I think throughout, seeing an example of gracious engagement, we can, hopefully it sparks fruitful conversations within your own households, families, friendship circles, your own communities, and really, empowers you as believers to look at your walks a little bit differently, a little more in depth, and to also encourage other people who are newer in the faith or people who don't have a relationship with Jesus at all. I think it's, a lot of the topics that we'll cover really kind of go into all of those areas. So I'm just really grateful to, have a friendship circle of people who are partnering with me on this, especially Devin, who even had the idea to host us at this beautiful studio, which is My Place Studio in Wayne, Michigan. So really happy to be here today, and thank you for hosting us. But yeah, so I would say, Devin, when we first met and you found out I had a podcast through probably, I think, just once I actually shared my social media information, which I don't always do because it's private. But what were your first, what are your first thoughts, or when you were going through listening to it, what kind of took it from intrigue or interest to more investment?
Yeah, I would say that it takes a certain kind of person to have a podcast. What I mean by that is it can take a lot of boldness, a lot of time. It involves a lot of skills, kind of simultaneously, using them. Takes, some speaking skills, takes some technological savviness, if you will. And so I think that's why, even though podcasting is kind of in a way, I would still say that if someone, has a podcast, and in your case had already completed an entire season of 15 plus 18 episodes.
20 episodes.
20 episodes. I would say that is impressive, because usually if someone even has a podcast, they're probably doing under 10. But to do 20 episodes that are 45 minutes to an hour long, I think that that was pretty notable. So that definitely stood out to me for sure. Yeah.
That's funny you say that. Most people's podcasts are under 10 episodes, because when I would say when the Lord put this on my heart to do, and told me to partner with my friend Ashley, who did episodes 1 through 9 with me.
Shout out to Ashley.
Yeah, shout out to Ashley. So shout out to Ashley for that. And she made the point statistically that if you can get over 10 episodes with a podcast, you'll usually continue it. So it was really impactful for us to get to episode 10. There was a lot of warfare around us getting to episode 10, which I will go into later. But I'm glad that we did it. I'm glad that we went through and doubled that and got to 20 episodes. And now keep an eye out for season 2 starting. And yeah, so I'm glad for that. So thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate
for
it.
sure.
Shout out. So diving in, you listened to episode 1, which was finding unity and division. Yeah. And this episode was really about talking about unity in a divided world in general, but just also unity within the body of Christ. So I think most people will interact with Christians and realize that there's various denominations of Christianity. There's Greek Orthodox, there's Catholics, there's Protestants, and then within Protestantism, there's also a lot of different denominations like Baptist, Pentecostal, Anglican, Lutheran. Like there's so many different, or Presbyterian.
Greens, beans,
too
potatoes,
many.
tomatoes.
Exactly. There's a lot of variety. And I think there's a lot of beauty and diversity, and especially diversity of thought and perspective and background. Especially when it comes to faith, because everyone expresses their faith differently, really colored by the lens of, I think, their culture and their background, or what's common within where they grew up and their family structure. So I thought it was a really great way to kind of introduce the season and introduce our mission of creating unity within the diversity and the division sometimes that comes with being a believer. And I would say, like, as when I interact with non-believers, that one of their biggest hangups is like the lack of unity within the church, or that we're not all unified on what we believe and what we say and what we do. And while I think there's reasoning behind some of those divisions, I think that it can deter people from the faith, and it really harms our witness. So I don't know. I really loved having that conversation. And I would ask you, like, how do you feel personally about like the different denominations within Christianity?
Yeah, I kind of think about it the way that I think about different foods and like different culinary
Flavors.
approaches. Like Japanese cuisine, you got Chinese cuisine, you got Italian, you got American, you got Mexican, you got African, you got all these different things. And I think
they all nourish you. Like the word of God all nourishes you.
They definitely all nourish you. You may not like a particular food. Like that may just be your personal preference. Like some people may not like Chinese food. Some people might not like
You say you don't
French
like Indian food.
I don't like the smell of Indian food. It tastes good, like butter chicken and different things like that. It just the smell is kind of abrupt and it lingers and it seeps. So I don't like the smell, but I kind of think of it like that. Like you can, and even the different culinary like approaches that you have in food. Like there's a way that each culture approaches cooking differently, different styles, different like ways to prepare the meal, and then it makes the food, and then people enjoy it. I think kind of denominations are kind of like that. I think the issue is when we try to express that this food is the best food, or this food gets it right. Like, I think the thing about like, while I see a lot of value in the different denominations, because I see, like, just similar to like how, like in heaven, there's representation of every nation, tribe, and tongue. I think that even though denominations can cause division, I do think that they are a foreshadowing of that diversity within the kingdom. And I think that it is beautiful how, different kind of people can find a way to worship the same God in a different way. So I do think that I do value different denominations. I think I learn from them just the way I learn from, how people, different ways to cook and, all these different things. There's not just one way to cook a steak. There's all different types of techniques, and, you look in different cultures, you'll find those. So there's not just one way to pray. There's not just one way to have a worship service. There's not just one way to sing. There's not just one way to preach. There's, so like, and if you go to these different denominations, you'll see those different things. And I think that if you have an open mind and open heart, you'll learn something, and you could be able to appreciate that kind of approach and expression. So, but however, emphasis on at the end of the day, we like what we like. And typically when we like what we like, when we come across something we don't like, we make it seem like no one should like it. Like, if we see someone that is eating, like if someone doesn't like, has a texture thing about seafood, or they don't like seafood, they can't understand how anyone else would like seafood because they don't like seafood. So I think we see that a lot when it comes to denominations as well, and that's when where it creates the division.
Yeah.
It just has larger implications than determining what food you like. So that's kind of what I.
No, I love
it.
that analogy. Yeah. That's fire.
Thanks.
Do you think that the differences ever like confuse people who are non-believers, and if so, like why?
Yeah, for sure. Because I think in order to really understand it, you have to exercise a certain measure of critical thinking, and I think sometimes people want things to be very simple and black and white.
Yeah.
And so when they see like the word unity and they see different denominations, they conflate differences with a lack of unity, which I don't think that's the proper interpretation of that in the grand scheme of things, because biblically we're never commanded to dissociate from our differences and what makes us unique and uniquely different, but to within the context of our differences, learn how to worship the same God together. And so I think it just takes a lot more thinking than I think most people are willing to do. So that's why it becomes a stumbling block, and typically there's no one around them to explain these things.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a really powerful point and analogy, and I think I can definitely see that. And I love that you use food as an analogy.
Very
because
palatable.
because the next episode was called Save the Planet, Eat a Cow.
Yeah.
So I talked a lot about food, and that was really Ashley's brainchild, and I love her passion for homesteading and for eating well and like being a good steward of your body. That I learned so much from her on that. But she really kind of wanted to meet like faith meeting sustainability and food ethics, and a discussion on like stewardship, like how we steward the land, how we steward like our health, how we steward what we eat, and how we like in our relationship with food, and that it's honoring to God, and that we're not like, I don't know, there's all these like fad diets out there of like, you should be keto, you should be, what is the meat eating, a carnivore, you should be this, or like what else is healthier, but really kind of taking a step back and not like putting any type of lifestyle or diet on a pedestal, like not being like I'm vegan, like whatever you're eating is beneath me, like, but really talking about the fact that like as Christians, like we have dominion over the earth and we can eat whatever we want to eat, and even Paul gives us a lot of liberty with like what we eat, and having less dietary restrictions in a sense, like we're not under the law anymore, so there are things that I think as New Testament believers we can eat, that people will sometimes have strong opinions about. And I understand like health reasons or any personal convictions too, because a lot of what we talked about even throughout the season was like kind of differentiating, consciousness and like convictions. So some people have certain convictions about things that they might want to refrain from. And I think that that's important to honor. But in the same breath, like don't judge or condemn other people for not sharing your personal convictions, especially if there's like nothing explicitly about that in scripture. And does that make sense?
Definitely.
But I would say, for you, like listening to it firsthand, like what did you take away from the episode the most? Like what stands out to you is like, this is why it's worth the listen.
Yeah. Sometimes things are worth listening to because of who is talking about them. And I think that in this case,
But okay.
Well, yeah, definitely you, but I do think that this was an episode that actually kind of shined, like her knowledge and expertise in this area definitely seemed like an area that she held very near and dear to her heart, and also walked it out, spent a lot of time kind of like thinking through what she believes about these things and how she applies them to her daily life. And it just seemed like she had just a lot of knowledge to provide about about this topic specifically. one of the main things, I remember she told a story about how she would be just eating peanut butter. And I forget exactly
When
the
she
results.
was vegan.
Some.
Horrible. It was horrible to
She
her
was just eating
hormones,
spoonfuls of
everything.
She was eating, and she was still hungry. And that was just her being able to share her personal experiences was good, and I think it really kind of like served as a an anchor and also just a current for the rest of the episode. So
Yeah.
very
totally
very
agree.
listenable. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, it is. Like, I think the title always throws people, but I think it was awesome. Like, it was just a really great conversation. I learned so much about her. I had a lot of reflection points for me. There's still stuff I have not tried. Like, I still have not made the liver how she told me to make it.
Yeah. That's funny.
I'll eat it soon, I promise. Like, I definitely will. But her next brainchild was also the episode following that, which was called Fake or Real News. And it was kind of lighthearted. It was a cute, it's an interesting concept. So, like, obviously, we're in a society where we are inundated by a 24/7 news cycle. News never used to be like that. News used to be you tune in from this hour to this hour, you get your news, you just get the straight information. Now it's all the time. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone is kind of like pulling for clickbait. They want to get the most views. They want the most people kind of engaged or even enraged by what they're saying just to get like energy from it a little bit. I would say that. I think there's a lot of spiritual energy that comes from where you get your news. And it really colors how you interact with the world around you. So we really wanted to have an episode that really was like, the game she kind of came up with was we're going to say a title, like a news headline, and you have to guess whether it's real or fake.
Yeah.
And so kind of like just see if it's real. It was
great
funny.
idea.
It was. I love that.
That was a great idea.
But she really I think I did pretty well. I can't even remember if I like guessed them all correctly, but
I didn't.
You didn't? Okay. It was fun though. It was really like, it was grounding. It was very grounding to kind of just take a step back and see, like, if I heard this, would I believe it? And would I even question myself or, like, dig a little bit deeper to see, like, what, is it true?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Was there any point in particular from the episode that kind of, like, stood out to you or, like, any news headline that you were like, whoa?
Not in particular, just the overall arch of the episode that there's really just some weird stuff that be happening and just different like news. Because some of the things that I was like, oh, no, that's false. He was like, no, that's real. I'm like, oh, that's crazy. That's insane. But no, yeah. So that was just kind of like being taken aback by just the ludicrous things that can occur in the world. So.
Yeah. No, all of us are, and we have to remember, like, this world is not our home. Like, we have something else to look forward to.
Passing through.
Yes, because sometimes you can get caught up real easily. So I mean, actually, that's kind of one of the. I love her brainchild. She's super, even though she hasn't. She's no longer consistently on the podcast. She will be coming back to do Fake or Real News, number 2 for season 2. So I'm really excited for that.
Awesome.
So I'm really, looking forward to, having her come back for that. There will be a couple other reiterations of different ideas like this. So a lot of the episodes will be like around a central theme. But I think going forward, there'll be a couple of episodes that are more like a series or like I don't even know how to say it, like a connecting point. So it's like Fake or Real News. I want to do a Holy Hot Topics. So we're going to so they might have like a semi-theme for that, but we're going to talk about so many different aspects and we're going to get multiple people's opinions. So it'll be more like panel setup. Whereas like Fake or Real News is like a game. Holy Hot Topics will be more panel interview style. And I think those will be like fun and a good way to like punctuate the season and kind of like add a little more depth to maybe some of the ideas that we've already talked about or introduce certain concepts. So I'm really excited to see how that goes.
Yeah.
For episode 4, we were really talking about the concept of self-love. I think this was my first big brainchild of something I really needed to talk about, because I was starting to get so bothered in our society about like this term of like self-love, and really started to make me feel like it's self-worship. Is it self-love, or is it like a fixation on self? Is it narcissism? You know, we know in the last days like there will be a rise in narcissism. That word gets thrown around a lot. But I think it's a spirit. I think it's like everyone can kind of have that spirit kind of over them at different points. A lot of the things that we do on a daily basis could be looked at as narcissistic. A lot of just our lifestyle choices can be viewed as that. So it's kind of, that episode was, I think, very powerful because it really took a step back and made you kind of reevaluating yourself. Like, okay, how much do I love myself? Like, how much do I actually care about myself? And is that coming from my love of God, or is that coming from just like selfish ambition kind of thing? I don't know. Like, it goes way more into it on the episode. So I definitely think that that's one to check out. But do you have any thoughts or takeaways from the self-love versus like God's love? I think I called it being self-full. And I think people were like, what? What does that even mean? But it really was like making sure your cup is full, and that everything you're giving and the love you're giving is like overflow, and that it's actually sourced from something that's not going to run out easily.
Yeah, I love that. As far as the takeaways, one of the things that I observed was kind of just a tendency, I think, that we have as people to lean into trends and extreme views. Like, I think sometimes it's like we're all doing this or we're all doing nothing. And I think one thing that definitely marks, I wouldn't even say my generation, but definitely my generation. But like, I think just where the world is in totality is like, it's just definitely an emphasis on things like self-love and things like taking care of yourself. Because I would say that is a counter reaction to just another period of time where it probably wasn't given the attention that it should have gotten, and that causes different consequences. And now swinging the pendulum causes other consequences that no one, expected. And so I think that just one thing that kind of stood out that the podcast led me to think about was just the tendency to lean one extreme or versus the other. And I think usually the proper approach is to have a healthy dose of both, healthy dose of sacrifice, healthy dose of rest, healthy dose of serving, healthy dose of boundaries, all these different things, not one or the other. So
yeah, no, I totally get that. And no, like it was definitely one of my favorites, but I think the episode following it was also, because it was like, I would say throughout the season, for myself personally, I realized like an underarching theme is idolatry. So I was kind of unpacking different ways in my life I feel like I've been subjected to idolatry and subjected to putting different aspects over my relationship with God. So when it came to like self-love, it was like I definitely was a giver. So I think I reached a point where I kind of swung the pendulum back, and I was like, oh, I need boundaries and I need self-care and I need to like do all these things. And then I had to still reel it back and kind of have that balance of sitting and serving, as you said, like not going super extreme, but also not forgetting myself in the midst of it.
Do you think that serving God can be an idol?
Yes.
What do you mean by that? Like, why do you say that?
Oof. I feel like we talk about it in a different episode, but we might need to talk about more in season 2. But I think some people can, especially when we talk about later on, like church hurt and burnout. I think a lot of people wear busyness as a badge. And if they say like, well, I'm doing this for God. So they kind of mask their own, to me, insecurity of the fact that they feel like the need to be productive and outperform other people with like, oh, I'm being holy. So they like, I don't know. And I think ministry can sometimes burn people out, but they're like, oh, it's for God. But it's like, really, it's ambition too. It's your ego. It's a lot of pride. You can't really serve people well unless you're replenished and refreshed. And I think I see a lot of people get caught up in like, I have a calling for ministry. Yeah, you do. You have a calling for ministry. Everyone has a calling for ministry, because your ministry could look like your job. It could look like taking care of your children. It could look like looking out for other neighbors. Like, your ministry could look very different, and doing it is great, and it's what you're here to do. But doing it in excess, going overboard, using it as something that creates your identity, that's when I think it becomes idolatry.
For sure. That makes sense.
I don't know. What do you think?
Definitely. I agree. Definitely. Yeah.
Is there a specific example in your mind that you're thinking of when it comes to that?
Not necessarily. I think just in general, just the idea of what I'm doing is more telling of my standing with the Lord rather than who I am. And I think, that can look like anything. That can look like, like you said, ministry. That can look like your job. That can look like being a parent, or like being a spouse. How finding our kind of like confidence in the fact that how well we're obeying, rather than kind of like just in the cross. Kind of regardless of how well we're obeying. Like, what happens when you what happens when you snapped at your kid? What happens when you
going through a difficult
hurt
season,
someone at your church, as a leader? What happens when you get fired? What has happened to your foundation internally? And at the end of the day, only we know that, really. Only we and God really kind of know that. And that's why it kind of takes a lot of time to be introspective and self-reflective is important, because there's just so many aspects of our walk that only we will know. And if we don't take the time to actually, figure it out, then we'll just go about life just kind of like continuing to live on the surface. So, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's real. That's real. And yeah, I think an episode that I think even challenged Ashley to go a little bit deeper and go below the surface was the Stay Woke episode, which followed this. And it was one of my favorite episodes because it really touched on like that personal idol for me of like being a social justice warrior. And it's kind of like maybe I conflate that too with like, oh, I'm doing this for like X, Y, and Z, not in a prideful way, but I think I had to really take a step back and be like, do I talk about the prison industrial complex more than I talk about Jesus? The answer was yes. Wow. So for a period of time, like, because you meet people like in college or have different backgrounds and understandings of things, so they might be like, well, they deserve to be here, da, da, da. And I'm like, and I would love to challenge those thoughts and conceptions, and I think that it was powerful, and I think it impacted people, and I don't think it was bad, but I think I didn't always direct people to Christ, direct people to like what the Bible says about caring for the people on the fringes of society, for different aspects that come in with our society, with what we care when we say social justice and say like caring for people. And I think those things are very valuable and important, but I also think that people can get so wrapped up in them that they forget about other aspects of the faith as well. So overall, the episode, which we entitled like Stay Woke, really explored biblical justice, righteous anger, and like I think the call for activism. Tried to be compassionate, still tried to have truth in the midst of it. And I was talking about really taking off reactivity to things, because a lot of things will happen in the media and people will react versus like taking a step back, looking at it, being discerning about what occurred, and knowing what steps are necessary to take forward. So I do believe, there's things I do believe in, like, that need to be reformed. There's things I do believe that need to be changed. But I also feel like not every situation is every situation.
Sure.
I don't know. So when you're a poet,
Yeah.
and I really do enjoy your poetry. And I think
Thank you.
one of the things I've even noticed, and then eventually I think you called out too, is that you don't have a lot of poems about
Black
like
stuff. Yeah.
black stuff.
Like
I don't know.
I
I
don't know,
hear a
that's
lot
how
of
I put it.
poems about like social justice or like just the
Yeah.
Black experience, and I think your poetry covers to me like the human experience and different human emotions that everyone goes through, the losses, deep topics as well, like suicide and love and like rebuilding and starting over, like just a lot of different topics that you cover that are very impactful. But yeah, one of them that's missing is, I think, the typical when people think of like spoken word.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say the reason being for that was, the main reason is a lack of inspiration. At the end of the day, if I was inspired to write a poem, like I would respond to that inspiration and write a poem. But I think also I was when I started writing poetry, that was all that I heard.
Yeah.
And I feel like in my mind, I was like, there's just so much else to life than the understandable bitterness that, I would say that us as a people kind of deal and wrestle with. And in my mind, I'm like, well, there's enough people talking about that stuff. I'll just talk about other stuff. So that's kind of like why I'm sure I'll, probably write a poem that's related to the Black experience in some way, shape, or form. But it'll probably be positive, because I would say that I think the thing about those poems, while they definitely bring light to a lot of issues, which is absolutely necessary,
Yeah.
they express a lot of legitimate pain, which is absolutely necessary. I think that sometimes we can, and it's natural, we can hyperfixate on the negative aspects of the Black experience and not shed enough light to the positive aspects. So
Agree.
that is my thing, like
Yeah.
I'm not always a silver lining kind of person. Definitely not. I think life can be very gruesome, and it's important to just not always put a positive outline on it. But yeah, so like when it comes to like when I write one, I'm probably gonna do something that's a little bit more positive. But when that comes,
Yeah.
it'll be fine.
Do you think, like, I don't know, I'm thinking about what you're saying. Do you feel that some people, like I was talked about earlier, like wearing busyness as a badge of honor? Do you think people wear victimhood as like a badge of honor?
Yes, I do. I do. That's tough things to say to Black people, though. I don't think there's a lot to unpack there.
Not just in the Black community, though, just in general. Like, I'm just going to say victimhood.
But
I think in our society,
that's a tough thing to say to any victim, though, because I mean, it's a very fine line to walk as a victim of something, to like bring light and shed light to the fact that you were a victim without allowing that to be decapitating, or allowing that to be something that removes your autonomy or removes your volition to make something or change something. Like at some point, your childhood, how bad it was, I won't say don't matter, but like at some point it's like, okay, you're grown now. You gotta do
do something
out.
about it. No, I think that's what I mean too. Yeah.
So at some point, the things that we go through, the trauma that we endure, does have not necessarily an expiration date, but it does have a ceiling to how much it can legitimately impact our day-to-day lives over time. And at some point, we have to shift from acknowledging our victim experience to being to using that and finding the good in it, growing from it, and learning from it, and then going on with our lives, because the world can keep spinning. So
I agree. And sometimes I think, even personally in my mind, I'll say to myself, like, there could be an area where I feel like I'm a victim, right? Or that something has happened to me, or there's been a certain trauma. But I look at it as like I want to turn victim to victory. Like I'm a victor more than I'm a victim. And I wish more people had that mentality, because when you are stuck, in my mind, like on a, oh, this happened to me. Yes, it did. These things are happened or happening to you. And that's horrible and it's frustrating. And there's a lot of things that can be happening. But are you going to take that happenstance and use it? Because, one of my favorite scriptures is Romans 8:28, and like God using all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes.
That's what
you could look at that and just say, well, God will work it out. But I think we have to partner with him too in choosing to have to be a victor and to look at sometimes the silver, maybe it's cheesy to say the silver lining, but yeah, I agree with that, of like looking for the positive in certain situations and like how it can create ultimate good. And then another episode like right after that, I think, is Feminism is a Scam. And I think it's a funny title, but it really kind of, I think, touches on like, okay, this thing happened. Like the women's liberation movement happened. There's a lot of positives that came from it. There's some negatives that came from it. In that same vein of like using something, maybe it was negative or maybe it was a certain experience, but like using it for ultimate good is important. So to kind of, I get thinking, transition onto that, like the whole topic of feminism and then femininity, because we covered like, it was a few different episodes we did over kind of like Women's History Month. So it was like we did Feminism as a Scam. That was episode 6. And then Feminine Flair, we did a part 1, part 2, because it became just a long conversation of just kind of, I think, unpacking what society says we gain from feminism and then what that really looks like through like a biblical context. Like what we're fighting for versus what scripture tells us, like as women we are and the things that we should value. For example, I think we kind of pointed out like equality, egalitarianism in a sense of like we're equal to men or wanting to be just like men, or we can do these things that men can do. We should have equal pay. And while I think those things fundamentally are not wrong, they're fair, they're valid. Like if you're doing the exact same job as a man, yeah, you should get paid the exact same as a man. But I also feel like it undercut just the reality that we're different and that our differences should also be valued. So we looked at it more so like equal value versus like just equality. So equity, I guess, is a better word to put for like equitable value versus like equal. Equal in the eyes of God in a sense, but like cherishing differences. I don't know, just kind of going over that revolution. So I will probably let people watch the episode and kind of like, or listen to the episode and kind of get their perspective on what they believe. But would you say overall, though, I'm going to ask you, and it's okay if you have an answer or don't have an answer, but do you think feminism was a scam?
Intentionally, I'm not necessarily sure. I would say that it definitely, like you said, kind of like provided some misleading narratives about, and it also painted women as a monolith in that way.
Yeah.
And it removed the space for just difference in desires, and like, some women just want different things in life. Some women just want their life time to just kind of like have different things. For instance, like there's things that are important to me that aren't important to other men, or there's things that are important to other men that just aren't important to me. And but I would say we're both masculine, like So I mean, I think whenever you try to approach something like this is what being a strong woman is. This is what being a good Christian is. This is what being a good Black person is. It just puts a yoke on people that honestly puts more does more damage than people think it does.
Yeah.
That's all.
I totally agree that. We talked about the stained glass ceiling, and that was kind of my brainchild of a title. She was like, "Oh, I like it," because we talk about like the glass ceiling in feminism a lot. So like breaking the glass ceiling, and we were kind of talking one day, like Ashley and I, just about the fact that within the church, there's clearly like different views on leadership and church leadership. Disclaimer: I think women can be pastors. I think that that's a gift. A pastoral ministry is a gift that you can get, that you're called to do. And I think women and men can both be pastors. But there's a breakdown within Christianity on like if women should be like lead pastors or not. So I will let y'all listen to the episode and create your own perspective and feedback. Ashley and I came from different backgrounds and context on it. So I think if there's any episode that gives great context on how to have a gracious conversation when you don't maybe agree or don't have the same perspective, that's one. That is really one where I think it really boiled down to even our language behind like what we're calling it and what does it mean and what are the roles and everything. So I think it was a great discussion about women in the church in general and then in church leadership. And I think it was very respectful. Do you know where you fall on that spectrum of like, should women be pastors? Should they be ministers? Like, should they lead? Should they be like the lead pastor of a church? I don't know. I know you were wrestling with it for a while.
One thing I will say is this is probably one of the most nuanced conversations and topics I would say in like
Christendom.
Yes, and like Bible, like trying to like do a Bible study on this stuff. There's no shortage of like people like that are scholars that have honestly dedicated a tremendous amount of time to this topic, and you know, there's just a lot of respectable people that fall on like multiple different viewpoints. And I would say to come to a conclusion and kind of like teach it or approach it as this is clearly the way to think about it, I think would be a little arrogant for anybody to do. But because when it comes to issues that aren't salvation based, like if you don't believe Jesus is God, then you're not a Christian.
Yeah,
you know, that's as simple as that. That's fair. But however, when it comes to these secondary issues or things that are not based, related to whether or not a person is saved or not, I think that the proper way to approach them is with humility and understanding that God and Scripture, there's a lot of mystery within it, and that there's a lot of complexity within it, and as humans, we're trying to break down as best as we can, and I think that it would behoove us to not allow like knowledge to puff us up and make us think like we have the answer, or this sect has the answer, or this type of people, group or denomination does it the right way. That we can do what we believe is right and what we have based on our interpretation, based on how we have studied Scripture, but understand that when a topic is as complex as women in ministry is, I think that is a clear line that I probably have this wrong, just like I think they probably have this wrong. And that even though I am going to obey my conscience before God, obey what I believe is right before God, if someone disagrees with me, the proper way to handle that is not to argue with them. The proper way to handle that is to understand and respect that we can both be trying our best to serve God within our own understanding and the limitations within that, without trying to make it seem like I hear God better than you do, or I understand the Bible better than you do. And so, just when it comes to things that are this complex and this multifaceted, with all this nuance, all this context, it's just very hard to say that this is the right way to think about it. It may be obvious to you, but understand that you're not the first Christian to ever exist.
Wrestle with it. Who was it that you were listening to? You said they did a whole series, like a deep dive on it. Was it Mike Wagner?
Winger.
I can't. Oh man, Mike Winger. Yeah, he's awesome. Shout out to him. We'll link it in the description. Like kind of thing of like, I haven't even finished listening to it. I think I had listened to a couple episodes of him that he did about it. But I want to like do a little bit of a deep dive, because even though we did the episode, like as I mentioned earlier on, like most of these things we're still walking through our understanding of. Like we're not ever approaching it as like, oh, we know the right answer, because we don't. We never will. Like that's not realistic, as you're pointing out very clearly. So, and more eloquently than I think I could. But
You're funny.
yeah. Well, love is stronger than pride.
For sure.
And that's the title of episode 10. So I would say episode 10 was pivotal, not just because of what I mentioned earlier with like getting to that 10th episode, but my partner changed, which was kind of sad a little bit. But it really got to a shift. It was a shift in not just like me having the format with it just being Ashley and I. So Ashley, if you listen to the season, she was living on the west side of the state. They were kind of in the midst of doing a move to Tennessee. She has 2 children. They homestead. She works full time. So that was a lot. That was a lot on her plate. And as much as we love these episodes, she was doing the majority of she was actually doing all the editing at that point, like all the editing, all the posting, everything. And that was a lot. So she kind of got to a point where she's like, I'm going to completely burn out at this point. Like we're doing this move, we're getting a house ready, we're doing all this stuff. So we had a conversation and she was like, I really want you to continue doing this. So you can keep using this platform. But she's like, I think there's other people that are even maybe more well-equipped than I to have these conversations with you. And even though initially that hurt, honestly, like I was like, oh no, but like you're the person I wanted to do it with. I was really gracious that she like, I think maybe had more foresight and more discernment than even I did, in knowing like that was the time that a shift needed to occur. And yeah, so she kind of sat back. She was like, hey, this is how I edit. This is like the software that I use. I'll teach you how to do it. You're going to keep going with this. And I'm like, okay. But even in the midst of that, I was very much like, God, like, what's up? Like, you told me to do it with Ashley. You told me like, this is my, like, not even with, but like, literally, like I was praying about it and I had brunch with her and she told me what the mission was, like, because she wanted to start a podcast. And it was almost the exact same thing that I was thinking of, wrote in my notes, whatever. So I was like, okay, you're my partner. But then I visited that week we had that conversation. I visited Motor City Church with a couple of friends, and the pastor there was doing a sermon about like friendships and about like people in your life that kind of speak to and who your community is, and like gaining wisdom really from other people around you. And it was so clearly highlighted into me during that sermon that I have various other people I can partner with for episodes. Like it was maybe a duh moment, but for me, it really highlighted like, okay, like it doesn't just have to be like this. And maybe this is an episode or a pivot that could actually speak to the true mission of the podcast, which was showing diversity in the body of Christ. It's like, how can you show true diversity? Like, yes, you can talk about different things and even talk about other people's perceptions that are different than yours, but really actually having a diverse group of people join and talk about their own experiences and perspectives and where they're kind of like a subject matter expert on. So that's kind of what we did. I feel like I say that it wasn't that Ashley stopped being my partner. It was that the Holy Spirit took more of a forward motion, and like I started to partner more with the Holy Spirit as far as like what I was going to talk about, who I was going to talk about it with, the outlines that I would create, like what scriptures I would highlight, and it just became something super different. And it was funny when we were talking about the podcast initially, and you basically told me like you noticed a shift around you were like, it was around episode 10, and I'm like, so what? I don't know. So clearly I just explained like what that shift was, but what kind of highlighted that to you the most?
And
like as you were listening,
probably like the decisiveness of your how you approach the topics, and how you talked about them, and just kind of like it seemed like you had a lot more confidence and boldness in how you were approaching the conversations.
This was not me. I didn't say that was going to be so hard. It was not me, because it was a lot of things that maybe I was honestly afraid to talk about. because I had a very distinctive conversation with Ashley, and she's like, I don't know if I want to talk about pride. Like, I don't know if I want to talk about LGBTQ. I don't know if I want to. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm like, but God's telling me I got to talk about it though. Yeah, there was a lot more boldness, I think, just in my approach, because it kind of turned from having topics that have really like just been, okay, what do I see these societal things as through a Christian lens? It became like, okay, scripture's now guiding the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And then what, like almost like a reverse. I don't know how to describe it better, but I think ultimately it was really powerful. Like, I love that Ashley kind of honored herself and kind of practiced what we were preaching, essentially, and like wanted to fill her own cup and make sure that was good so she could give to all the other things and other aspects of her life. And I also thought it was awesome that it didn't like, it only strengthened our friendship, her stepping away, and like made room for new things. So I think that was a pivotal moment, and it went from, I don't know, it also took them, I think it took a different turn of as far as like the podcast mission of like encouraging and evangelizing kind of really was sparked in that episode.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like, it was more so like just, we're going to encourage you how to be better Christians in general, because there's Christians who do this, who interact with that community horribly, like just horribly. And that's not Christ-like in the least. So it was encouragement on that, and a little bit of like, hey, like, we need to do better, but also like evangelism, a little bit of a hand stretch of like, if you've ever been curious about Jesus, like, this is what it should look like.
I would say it particularly, I think it just matters understanding the nuance, because I think like dealing with like those temptations and that kind of attraction in particular is honestly one of the, if you're not going through that, it's one of the more unrelatable experiences, I would say. And so I think that like resisting the urge to stigmatize, resisting the urge to make one particular behavior or falling more drastic than another is important. And also just maintaining connection. I think that's another thing, like maintaining the friendship, maintaining the times like where there's a struggle, maintaining that community in a sense, because I think the one thing that drives it away is shame, and I like to define shame as feeling unworthy of connection. And so like I think that is very common with people with same-sex attraction and different things like that they feel like, since I deal with this, I'm not welcome in that community, therefore I'm gonna steer away from that community. And I think just flipping that narrative and removing the tendency to feel shame will open the door to kind of like have those relationships, and over time just help people in that are struggling in that way particularly.
Do you? I 100% agree. Do you have any tips for like Christians on how to be more welcoming, and just like what would you say to a Christian who's struggling with maybe being low-key homophobic?
Well, I don't know.
Okay, that's fair. That is a fair question.
Because that's I
Answer.
feel like that's God. That's gonna like kind of have to address that, because there definitely comes a little bit of arrogance. I feel like that comes with that. Like, I don't know. I think because like phobia is a fear of so like if you feel so strongly about this person's behavior that you kind of have a aversion to them, that's kind of crazy to do as a Christian, in my opinion. So and I feel like that's something that like has to be taken to the altar. Oof. And ask for grace in that area.
I feel you on that. Another area where we have to exercise a lot of grace with ourselves is dating. I'm just kidding.
That's funny. That's funny.
So the next episode after that was episode 11, and we entitled it Holy Girl Summer, and I did it with my friend Julia. Great episode, very lighthearted, I think, amongst most of the episodes we do that were kind of heavy. It was more of a lighthearted episode, but it did get very deep. It was joyful, but it was also convicting. It was full of laughter, but it was also like, ooh, like, I don't know. I think I would just ask, like, was there anything that stood out to you that, like, a point where you would maybe even say to someone else for, like, as encouragement, as their, I don't know.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not something that stood out.
Yeah. It all kind of glossed over.
Yes, okay. Something that did stood out was the ability to you just are able to not approach, like, have a understanding of what the purpose of like dating is that's different than a friendship, and like, just kind of like not making it awkward, if that makes sense, like kind of like knowing a way to be romantic, or knowing a way to be kind of like, just being able to be like infatuated and loving with the person that you're not married to in a way that is notable and distinct, without continually, not allowing yourself to be Christian in that area on purpose.
Yeah. So the next episode you mentioned to me was your favorite, and it was called Entertainment. I would say overall it's just explored the spiritual impact of music and media. I don't know. It was a vulnerable episode for me to make, honestly, because it was very personal. Because I feel like I've had a lot of like, I don't know, like difficult experiences in this area. There's even been friendships challenged by this topic, but I don't know. Why do you say that it was your favorite episode? Like, what was it for you that was like, that stood it apart from all the rest? Because you listened to literally all of them.
Yeah, because you kind of touched on it, just like what you said about your vulnerability, your approach. Like, it was very narrative driven, but you were able to highlight the difference between orthodoxy and, or you didn't say this, I kind of said this, but what we believe about our faith doctrinally, but also in how we practice what we believe. I feel like those two things are very different. Like, you can believe that you can say you love God, and then how you actually live that out can be that, like, those things are different for different people. And so, and I think that was something that's kind of like made me think about, that's something that the episode made me think about. And so just hearing you kind of like wrestle through that and figure out what that looks like for you, in good conscience, was interesting and encouraging. So.
Thank you. I want to say that was a really vulnerable episode for me to make, as we both pointed out. It was actually one of the most challenging episodes to even make, just because my partner kept changing. I don't know, like, it was like I had tried to do it with Ashley at one point, and that didn't work out. And then I had another friend named Ashley that I tried to do it with, and that didn't work out. But eventually I did it with my friend Grace, and you've kind of had an interaction with Grace, so it was very powerful. She had a similar experience to me that I was honestly completely unaware of. So she literally was like, wow, this is something I've actually walked through and struggled with. And I'm like, that's insane. Like, so, okay, God was right when he told me, like, ask Grace. And I'm glad that I did. Same thing happened with the next episode of House Divided with Shamir. We were both really struggling with the 2024 election. We both had a lot of like thoughts, a lot of strong emotions, a lot of feelings, and it was helpful to have someone who was like willing to walk through that with me, because at moments it felt very like isolating in the circles that I was in to like express certain opinions, or just to question things. Like, it was weird to not be able to question things when I grew up like literally always having conversations about politics and always being encouraged to think critically and think for myself. And then it was suddenly like, we're adults, but people are looking at us like, well, why would you have that opinion? And it was just it was wild, but it was so encouraging to like have her and a couple other friends kind of like discuss things with me. And I think even like some of the things that we covered in the episode were like some part of our first conversation when you had no idea about this podcast. And it was very like a spark for me of like, oh wow, like he gets it kind of thing. And, to kind of have that balance of like politics through a faith lens and not get caught up in single issue voting or just being closed-minded or being like really judgy. That was really pivotal for me, but it also was, I think, challenging. So I think anyone who would like to understand, if you're a Democrat and you don't understand why someone's a Republican who's a Christian, or someone who's a Republican who doesn't understand why someone could be a Democrat and be a Christian, definitely recommend checking out that episode. I think it'll illuminate your mind a lot. I think it will give you more of a balanced perspective. I think both of us identify as moderate in a sense, but I think it was really powerful, and I think there's some really convicting, for me, points that I wanted to bring out, and it was also very vulnerable to do because literally I studied political science, so that was like very like a, man, my whole core is being shaken right now, but it was cool. And New Age Same Devil also kind of did that, as far as like shaking core beliefs, shaking like an experience of things that have been with me since I was very young, spiritual practices that I've had, and having to put them under a microscope, really talk about my experience with them, talk about what has gone well and what has gone poorly, as far as like realizing what's honoring God and what's not. So really think that was powerful. And then episode 15, which I did. So I did House Divided with Shamir again, did the New Age Same Devil with my friend Natasha. She's of Indian descent, and she had a lot of very strong opinions and emotions about a lot of the things that we covered. And with Warfare is Real, I did it with my friend Tiara, and that one was super powerful. Just kind of, wow. Even the like technological things that were happening when I tried to record that episode were crazy. But I was also like, you know what? The enemy don't want this to get out. But it was very like, I don't know. I think we all experience warfare, but I think it was very, I don't know. I thought it was a really cool episode. So the last few episodes were, kind of a little less maybe personal because they weren't super experiences that I've completely walked through on my own, but I felt like were really important to talk through. So episode 16 was called Raising Arrows, and it was about parenting and discipleship and legacy building. I did it with my friend Elise. She homeschools her boys, so, and just their perspective, like they live in a multi-generational household, and I really loved hearing like her perspective on a lot of different things. I admire her as a mother and what her husband does with their kids. So really love that episode. If you're raising kids, if you have kids in your life, if you're a mentor, I think that's a really great one to check out. Episode 17, When Church People Hurt People. Church hurt, I think, is something I know a lot of people personally struggle with. I've dealt with it in some contexts, not super severely, but we really do, I think, unpack a lot of really great points. You mentioned earlier, like aspects of shame. We talk about that. We talk about pride, shame, like within ourselves, like those barriers to connection and barriers to wanting to be a part of community. And I did that with my friend Lexi. So that was really awesome. And then episode 18, I did with my friend Alyssa, and obviously a lot of these people are my friends, so it would only be appropriate to have an episode talking about friendship and Christian friendship and ironing, sharpening iron. And I really enjoyed, kind of going through that and kind of looking at friendship through her perspective, because we have different approaches. Our friendship lives look different. I think people look at me like, oh, you have a lot of friends. And I'm like, I have like a lot of depth, I think, more so than like, I don't know. I feel like quality versus quantity is always how I approach friendship. And some people that looks very different. That could look like 2 friends. That could look like 20 friends that they're actually very close to. I think I have like 20 friends I'm very close to. But like, and then I have my inner circle of like 3 or 4 friends that I'm like, I maybe have a lot of investment in. But I think you're kind of similar. Like we both have like an inner circle in a way. I think it's important to have those people around personally. Yeah, so that was a great conversation with Alyssa. And then I did like episode 19, which was called I Don't Know How She Does It, with my friend Katie. And it was about burnout, career, idolizing busyness, productivity. So a lot of what we touched on even earlier in this recap, we kind of like elaborated on more in that episode. So if that's something that you do struggle with, of like, I think putting purpose on a pedestal, I think that'd be a great one to check out as well. And episode 20, which I think was a great way to end the season, was called Being Still. And it was about rest and Sabbath and stillness and embracing that. We really walked through this book called Sacred Rest. And I don't know, I think it was very much a restoring of like spiritual wellness in a way, and like how rest is so tied into that. And then I actually gave you that book for a little bit. You read it quickly. Do you have any takeaways as far as like from Sacred Rest that you'd like to share, or
just how rest can be multifaceted, and there's just different like ways to approach it, whether if it's recreational or creative rest, or actually just social rest or different things like that. I think that's what kind of stood out to me, because even in times where I'm not maybe like getting the most quantity or amount of sleep, I still can feel well rested. So I think that was one of the main kind of things that stood out from the book.
Yeah. Wow. So, overall throughout the season, I would say there was idolatry as a theme. There was a faith progression, like from consciousness, I think, of certain topics to conviction, I think was a big part for me. I think all the episodes progressed kind of how, almost mirroring, I think, how I've progressed in my faith walk a little bit. But the whole point of the podcast is to be a journey. It's to be a journey of like how we can walk out like our faith with each other, with our community, individually, what's happening internally and externally in our lives. So I sincerely hope that, you kind of take a listen to season 1 and stay tuned for season 2. It should be coming out fairly shortly. And just to remember that our mission as believers is to spread the gospel. So if this episode or any of the other episodes we listed have impacted you in any way, shape, or form, I would just encourage you to please share it and to evangelize or to encourage other believers, and to subscribe and join the podcast and join the conversation. So thank you for listening, and God bless you.